So folks, today we are going to be installing the actual deck boards, but I've got a bit of a dilemma. Hi folks, and welcome back to the show. As I say, I've got a bit of a dilemma here because, as you may be aware, I have spent a lot of money on this deck tape, which is allegedly going to protect the joists and stop them from rotting over time. It needs to be stuck on top of the joists. This costs 62 quid a roll, and the problem that I've got is that it's about to start chucking it down. We are basically looking at rain from 5 o'clock this afternoon, and then it's raining tomorrow and raining the next day and raining the next day. And although I think you can install this stuff onto damp wood, I don't really want to risk it at £62 a roll. So at the point that I've got this fitted, I really want to get the deck boards on top as quickly as possible. So the general plan of attack is, I haven't got time to babysit the camera, I just need to plough on and get this done as quickly as possible. We have got a whole load of tape to stick to the joists. So I'm going to time myself to do one board. We've got 70 boards to do here, so sometimes it's a good idea, time yourself on one, and then you can set a bit of an expectation of how long the job's going to be. Let's go. I'll try and talk through it a little bit, but I also don't want to upset how long this is going to take me. But obviously, since the camera's rolling, I'll make loads of mistakes now. So I like to get one screw in exactly the right place, just so the board doesn't move. And then I think the quickest way is to mark all of the screw positions. I'm just using an awl. Hope this is recording. Yeah, it is. And I'm recording a time lapse at the same time, which will go back to in a second. But I'm about to have a coffee break, and I'd like to get an idea of whether it's going to be possible to do this before the rain starts. I like to work my way along from the top, just putting one screw in every second joist. Just for the minute, just to square the board up using my spacer. These boards are absolutely soaking wet as well, because the rain, man, I've never known an early summer this bad in the UK. I mean, I know we'll get a lot of rain, but it's been crazy. These are Timco, are they Timco? Yeah, Timco stainless steel fixings I'm using. Self-drilling, cylinder head, really nice fixings. Putting a bit of weight down on each joist as I come back, and 2 screws in every joist location, just below the surface of the wood. I quite like being able to see these because such nice fixings. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I've done a little round over on the end. You might have seen on the time lapse. The round over takes 20 seconds. It's so quick to do, and I think it's a much nicer finish. I'm quite happy to see the fixings. It makes maintenance easier. It's easier to find the fixings if you ever need to get a board out. And I don't think they look unpleasant. And because they're stainless steel, they're not going to go all rusty and minging. Stop the clock, one board. What's that? What, 6 minutes-ish? So you know, it was a brave attempt, but we've been beaten by the weather again. But this is quite a good opportunity to see how well the overhang works. I don't know if you can see, I mean, we've had absolutely torrential rain, and the boards next to the house there are still bone dry. So, all good, but that'll have to do for now. And we'll get to see how well the very expensive deck tape works when the joists get very, very wet, because it's going to be raining a lot for the next day or so, and it'll be a good test. And man, when I say it's a good test for rain on the deck tape, I wasn't joking. It's basically been raining for 5 days non-stop, and it's still raining at the moment, but it's very light. I did manage to get a few more boards done in that direction, but tomorrow's going to be the day. Fingers crossed. Everything's still too wet today. I'll get these boards out the road. These are just there as a bit of a reminder not to walk on the end there, because that's completely unsupported at the moment. Whoops. But this gives me a good opportunity to show you what the plan is for the inset step. Not an insect step, but listening back, I can see why you might have thought I said that. So, as you may remember from the first video, and if you've been on the member zone as well and seen all the behind the scenes stuff, we're going to have a step that kind of comes in here. And I was deliberating a little bit about how to do this, but actually I ended up overthinking it far too much, as per usual. So all I've done obviously is start from this end perfectly straight, keeping straight all the way along. Every few boards I've been double checking with the string line and spacers and measuring from one end up to where I am to check that I'm still perfectly parallel and the boards are nice and straight, because it's easy to go out. The further you go along, you can start like multiplying an error and making the error worse and worse. So you do have to be a little bit careful with that. Do keep double checking as you work your way along that you are still A, straight, and B, not kind of starting to run off at a weird angle or anything like that. But all I've done, if you can imagine, the step is going to be from this board onwards. So this board here, we've got one screw in the right here, but this side is currently unsupported. But once I've chopped off the excess on all of these boards, I'll be able to get under here and I'll just put a little supporting piece in underneath here. That'll take the other side of that. So basically it just makes the step a little bit kind of narrower than it was. So we're working all the way along, blah, blah, blah. And then exactly the same story at this end. And by the way, oh man, a lot of these boards that were so bent, it's been a challenge kind of getting them straightened up. But this one, it doesn't matter that it's bent because this is going to get chopped off, kind of up here-ish. And then we've left this one long at the moment. This is almost completely unsupported. Trying my best to show you from underneath. So this is the board that we're talking about here. So we'll need some supports in under here, and I can't put those supports in until I've trimmed off these boards along here. But as soon as they're out the road, it's dead easy to get under there. Just put a couple of bits of wood underneath there to take the weight of that. You'll see once I chop everything back. But for the minute, everything's still far too wet to cut. If you've ever tried cutting really wet wood and doing a round over with a router bit on wet wood, it just turns into a kind of fibrous, mushy mess. It doesn't work very well at all. So I'm just going to leave this for the moment to dry out. But one other thing I'll show you here. So on this end, we've still got two boards left to fasten down. So that one is still loose and the one next to it is still loose. But I can show you the deck tape, and it seems to have held up pretty well. It's not like peeling up or anything. I think in hindsight maybe I should have gone for the wider tape, but I don't know if that's entirely necessary. It's protecting the top of the joist. That's the purpose of the deck tape, and it also kind of self-heals around the screws, or at least that's the idea, so that once you screw through it, water, hopefully not too much water, is getting through into the joist. But yeah, bear in mind it's been raining pretty much solidly for 5 days now. Tape seems fine. It's not trying to peel itself off the joist or anything, so I'm happy with that. Anyway, what I'm going to do, I'll get those last remaining boards put down, and then I can cut all these edges off, and then we can see what we're doing with the step. And yes, I've had to move all the wood over this side of the garden because this has now taken so long that I've successfully ended up killing half of our lawn. How's my tomatoes doing? Oh my word, they're getting quite big now. If you want to know more about the gardening side of things, head over to Mandy Matt channel, link down in the description below. As per usual, not enough hours in the day. Oh my word, one extreme to the other, the rain has stopped and suddenly we have got good weather. This is tremendous news. I wanted to show you this quickly because doing the step is quite an interesting bit, because if you imagine when you're sitting in the house, you need the step boards on the step bit lower down to be perfectly in line with these boards that are higher up. If they're not, it'll look absolutely ridiculous. I can see by eye at the minute that they are not properly lined up. They're slightly on the skew, kind of pointing that direction. But basically, looking at it from the front, what I've done is I've pulled down a perfectly vertical line directly below some of the deck boards. So, for example, we'll look at this board here. So I've just used a spirit level, and from the edge of that board, I've pulled this vertical line down. So we know that this board has to be perfectly in line with the edge of that. You can see it's actually slightly over that way at the minute, but we might have to live with that. I'll tell you why in a second. We're not 100% set in stone yet, but basically, as we work our way along, all the boards seem to be getting narrower in that direction. So for example, we'll get to here, and we're actually about 1 millimetre off that way, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but if you end up 1 millimetre off for 5 boards, I mean, that's like a noticeable amount. 5 mil off by the time you get to here, 10 mil off by the time you get to here. But you can see, for example, here on this board, you can see from the spacer, we're perfectly on that vertical line there. So I'm just going to do a little bit more kind of jiggery pokery, swapping spacers around. You can see I'm using a mix of 5 mil and 6 mil spacers, kind of alternating, just to kind of vaguely try and bring everything in line. And then once I've got this end perfectly lined up, then I'll worry about getting kind of the skew of it, if that makes sense. Right, so I'm pretty happy with that. So it's time to fix some of these ends down, just to stop them moving around. I do need to put a bit of wood treatment on the end of these. That seems pretty good there. Pop one screw in just to hold that in position. And then, theoretically, whatever spacer I'm using at that end, I'll just bring to this side. I'll work my way along. I'm going to just work my way up to this board here. Just check from this one. Are we in line? Actually, I'll tell you what, it'll be easier if I flip that way. It's just you can't really see what I'm doing if I do it that way. But you'll just have to trust me. That is perfectly in line with the end of that. Oh, that's pretty good. That is pretty good. So, I'm going to work my way along. Every 5 boards, double check that I'm perfectly in line with the top boards. Before I do that, I need to mark a string line across for my screw locations, otherwise they're all going to end up wonky. So I'll do that and come back to you once the steps all screwed down. There we go, one step. And the exciting thing is that is the crux of the decking done. All of the last bits and pieces are basically trim. So we've got trims to put all the way around, well, basically every edge. Now, the challenging bit with this is that I've obviously used all of my best deck boards for the deck itself. I'm down to the dregs, and man, the quality of some of this decking, I'm really not impressed with it. This is Arbor deck, and well, I don't know, is this normal? Out of 70 boards, I mean, those are all boards that I couldn't use for the main deck for one reason or another. For example, that has a massive knot on the end and a great big kind of weird rotten gouge thing in the middle of it. This one, an entire edge of the board is completely split. This one has a literal hole going all the way through the middle of it. This one's completely split on the end. This one has a massive gouge in it. This one looks absolutely perfect until you get halfway down, and then, oh dear. What's going on with the edge of that? That's not good. So that board's completely unusable. So I'm going to have a little bit of an interim tidy up, have a little break, sort out the best boards from the absolutely unusable boards, tidy all this mess up, and I'll make a start and I'll come back to you very shortly. And story so far, I've got most of the top level trim done, which I'm going to talk about in a second, and then I've also fitted a few of these kind of packer pieces around the edge just to kind of help support the bottom level trim. So there's 10 of those all in, so another 2 there, a whole bunch up that edge as well. And I'm now on to the next level of trim down. Now, I must admit, I have been in two minds whether or not to bother doing mitre joints here, because if anything's going to fail, these are going to open up. I mean, at the moment, just to show you, this is a relatively tight mitre here, but because of the curve in the wood, we're ending up getting a little bit out towards the bottom, but it makes no odds, because trust me, over time, even though I've applied absolutely loads of wood treatment, this will open up unevenly, because you've basically got a thinner piece of wood towards the end that's potentially expanding and contracting more than the thicker bit of wood towards the other side. So folks, you know, I'll report back on this, but you could have got away with just doing butt joints here. Could have also done a picture frame around, but I didn't really want that. And even with a picture frame border, the mitre still open up on softwood. There's very little you can do about that. But anyway, I've got my next bit of wood ready to fit. I'm going to crack on, get the next lower level down, done. As per usual, all cut ends are treated with loads and loads of wood preservative. So I'll come back to you once that's all done. So I'll be honest, I went down a bit of a rabbit hole deciding what finish to apply, to the extent that it probably warrants a separate video. I ended up having a chat with Charlie from Charlie DIYte, since he's already made an excellent video on the topic. Go and check out his channel if you want to know more. I'll include a link in the description, but for now I just settled on Baratine Clear Deck Oil. I had it narrowed down to 4 different oils I'd consider using, but this video is already far too long, so hit subscribe and we'll have a separate chat all about finishes. And folks, that is us done. Finally, you know, is it the best deck in the world? Probably not, but is it going to last? Yeah, I think it will. You know, stainless steel fixings pretty much everywhere. The deck base is as solid and protected as it can be, really. We've catered for all of our underfloor vents to make sure we've still got plenty of ventilation getting it underneath the house. We've got a slight fall going in that direction. It's all treated, and hopefully, you know, a bit of yearly basic maintenance, giving it a bit of a clean down, maybe a retreatment every 1 to 2 years, but honestly, it was so quick to treat the deck. Now that the first treatment's done, I reckon you could have that done in, what, an hour or something like that. It's not a huge job. As long as you keep on top of it, you should have a deck that lasts for, I would say, at least 20 years. Just remember, plant pots, planters, anything like that, always keep them raised up off the decking so there's plenty airflow underneath, so any water that comes through can dry off, no problem. But I must admit, with this deck oil that we've used, the water's beading really, really well and doesn't seem to be sinking into the timber at all, but that will change over time as the pores of the wood open up. So you do need to protect your surface of your decking from constant moisture. Loads more videos coming up. Over on the member zone, there's a video all about estimating the amount of timber that we needed to buy, how did we know exactly what to get and how much of what to get. There's another video going into the detail of all the fixings we used. There's quite a lot of expensive fixings on this deck, and it's important that you order the right quantity of them, so I've made a video all about working out exactly how many fixings we needed for this project. There's a full shopping list of pretty much everything we've bought for this project over on the member zone as well, and there's a video coming very soon about designing the inset step and a few of the kind of considerations that I had to think about doing that. And on this channel, we've got all sorts coming up. We've got a video about using concrete screws and a few tips for using those, a few different alternative ways of fixing things into concrete. I've got a video coming up all about fitting the noggins, which we didn't really talk about in the main video because it was going into a little bit too much detail, but I've got a few more tips surrounding those and why we did things in a certain way. I've got a video coming up all about finishes. As you know, we ended up using the baratine oil on this. I researched it to the nth degree and I kind of narrowed it down to 4 that I would use, and I'll explain that in a separate video because it'll take far too long. There's also a video coming up comparing composite decking with timber decking, so if you can't decide between the two, hopefully that video will help you out. And of course there's a full cost breakdown coming up of this project, exactly what it cost to the penny to put this entire deck together as a DIY job. And I'll also explain what I think a project like this should cost if you're paying a professional to do it for you. It's not a straightforward job when you get into the detail of it, and you really, really do get what you pay for on a job like this. So if any of those videos float your boat, you know what to do, hit the subscribe button. If anything on the member zone is of interest, it's less than £5 to sign up on there, and at the moment I think there's about an extra 70 videos going into much more detail on the sort of projects that I do. For now, folks, the weather has finally improved and it's time to enjoy this project. So as per usual, look after one another, be nice to each other. We shall see you next time. Tatty bye.